I'm not an expert in any of these topics, but I think that this is interesting and worth discussing. We are entering a new age. The clean energy transition is here, and we're at the beginning of it. We've been living with the consequences of burning fossil fuels for decades. Now it's time to address that problem. And like any massive undertaking, it will take a lot of time and resources to get the job done. Thankfully, we have some things going for us. We have political will. We have a better understanding of the problem than we used to. We also have the capability to take on this challenge. But we're still going to need to put in a lot of hard work over the next several years. And one of the most important tasks will be the build-up of new infrastructure. What I want to do today is look at some of the major components of the clean energy transition and talk about what kind of scale-up we can expect to see. Specifically, I want to focus on solar and wind energy, because I think those are particularly interesting right now, but I'll try to touch on other aspects of the energy grid as well. This is just a broad brush overview, and there are so many details that would need to be explored in depth in their own videos. But hopefully, we can get some of the big picture in focus. So let's get started. The first thing we'll look at is the scale of the solar and wind industry. In 2020, global capacity for solar was around 700 gigawatts. For wind, it was around 800 gigawatts. That means the total installed capacity across all generators in the world, for both types combined, was somewhere around 1,500 gigawatts. For comparison, according to the CIA World Factbook, the total installed capacity of coal-fired power plants is around 4,000 gigawatts. Natural gas is a bit less than 6,000 gigawatts. This shows the immense scale of the challenge ahead of us, if we want to replace coal and natural gas with renewables. But what's even more telling is to look at the growth rate of the solar and wind industries. From 2019 to 2020, solar grew by around 12% and wind grew by around 7%. That's a combined growth rate of nearly 20% year over year. On the other hand, the coal industry shrank by about 3%, and natural gas remained relatively flat. Coal has been shrinking for the past decade due to several factors, including environmental concerns and competition from cheaper sources of energy. If we're able to keep up this momentum, then we should be able to expect the same kind of growth from renewable energy over the coming years. If we assume 20% growth per year for solar and wind combined, then in 5 years we'd have around 1,800 gigawatts, and in 10 years we'd have around 2,300 gigawatts. So even if we kept everything else constant, which of course it won't be, we'd still be close to replacing the amount of power generated by coal. And if we were able to somehow accelerate this growth even further, then we could get there sooner. Another thing we need to look at is the cost of renewables. Between 2010 and 2020, the cost of utility-scale solar dropped by around 89%. For onshore wind, it dropped by around 65%. Meanwhile, the cost of coal increased by around 22%. Again, this is all according to data from the CIA World Factbook. These dramatic decreases in cost are due to economies of scale, technological improvements and government policies that incentivize companies to develop and deploy new renewable technologies. The trend looks good for the future as well. According to a report from the International Renewable Energy Agency, the cost of solar is expected to drop another 58% between 2020 and 2030, and wind is expected to drop another 13%. These trends will allow us to continue growing renewable energy production while keeping costs down. So far we've been looking at large-scale electricity generation, but we'll also need to look at batteries. Right now the grid stores around 170 gigawatt-hours of electricity in pumped hydro facilities, but we're going to need more storage as we move forward. Lithium-ion battery storage is currently around 200 gigawatt-hours, but is expected to grow to around 2,000 gigawatt-hours by 2030, according to the same report from the International Renewable Energy Agency. Also, according to them, lithium-ion costs are expected to drop by 57% over the next decade. And this is great news. Batteries will be crucial in smoothing out the intermittency of renewables like solar and wind. Another reason why batteries are so important is electric vehicles. In 2020, there were around 6.5 million electric vehicles on the road worldwide. This represents about 3% of all vehicles in operation, but that number is expected to grow quickly. Bloomberg New Energy Outlook predicts that EVs will account for half of all new car sales by 2040. They also predict that EVs will account for 30% of all cars on the road by 2050. This is driven by the increasing popularity of EVs among consumers who want cheaper running costs and reduced emissions. It's also helped along by governments offering subsidies and tax breaks to incentivize the purchase of EVs. In order to power these EVs, we're going to need more electricity, which means more renewable energy generation and more batteries. One study predicts that by 2030, the EV boom will increase electricity demand by 20%, which is equal to adding another 300 gigawatts of electricity to the grid. Another study suggests that by 2040, EVs could account for 25% of electricity demand globally. Both of these studies were conducted in 2020, before the recent surge in EV popularity, so the numbers may already be outdated and likely conservative. All this extra electricity is going to require an upgrade to our energy grid. The electrical grid has three main components: generation, transmission, and distribution. Right now, most grids are designed for one-way electricity flow from the power plant to the consumer. But as more renewables are added and batteries become more common, the direction of electricity flow will change. With distributed energy resources, the consumer might be able to generate their own electricity and sell it back to the grid. This two-way flow of electricity will require a modernized grid. It's hard to say exactly what kind of scale-up we should expect for the grid, because so much of it depends on how quickly we adopt distributed energy resources. Some studies suggest that investments in grid infrastructure will need to double over the next decade to accommodate this shift. IVE also heard some experts say that the US grid hasn't received adequate investment over the last few decades. If that's true, then doubling investment probably isn't enough. But we'll need to wait and see how things evolve over the next few years. There's a lot of opportunity for improving the grid beyond just upgrading hardware. A report published in 2021 by the non-profit organization American Action Forum estimates that modernizing the US grid could save us around $120 billion annually by reducing electricity waste and outage costs. In addition to that, smart grids can reduce congestion, improve reliability, and support the integration of distributed energy resources. So there's a lot of potential upside to investing in grid infrastructure. To recap, we looked at the current scale of renewable energy and compared it to fossil fuels. We saw that solar and wind are growing at a fast pace and are expected to continue that trend into the future. We also saw that the cost of renewables is decreasing while the cost of fossil fuels is increasing. These trends will make it easier and cheaper to replace fossil fuels with renewables over time. Finally, we looked at how the grid will need to adapt to the changing needs of the future and how much money we could save by making those upgrades. Hopefully I was able to show you that we're at the beginning of a huge economic transition and that there is a lot of opportunity ahead of us. There are so many different ways we can go with this, but I wanted to keep it somewhat concise and just hit some of the big points. Let me know in the comments what other aspects of the clean energy transition we could discuss. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.